Hi friends, welcome to Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff, where today we are watching X-Men 97. My name's Steve Selnick, and joining me as always, he just crashed through the roof of the X-Mansion in his pod coming down from space. It's my good friend, Charlie Peppers. Charlie, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing better than Charles because he is late as fuck.
Just because you say you hope you're not too late does not excuse the fact that you are 1,000% too late. Now, Charlie, before we welcome our guests, I just want you were just on the East Coast for a minute back in New York City. Would you just tell us about how your time in New York City was?
Well, it was great. I was there for the Edgar Allan Poe Awards for Poker Face. It was super delightful. I got to bring my partner, Cody. I got to bring my mom. They were my dates. It was very lucky. I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. Here's something very nerdy, and I pointed this out to Cody as we were, our hotel, it was in Midtown. Every time we passed a familiar skyscraper, I would look up and I would think, I wonder how it would feel like to web swing as Spider-Man in the PS5 game off of that building. That is my level of nerdiness that I am glad that I can just say on this pod because we are amongst our people. But New York was fantastic. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, of course. Glad to hear it. And y'all looked amazing in your suits. Y'all slayed it. Y'all looked amazing in other photos. I think those were more closed for just the close friends, but that's all I'll leave it at. And let's go ahead and welcome our... Yeah, you saw those too? Perfect. We're on the same page, baby. Let's go.
On the green circle.
Let's go, Green Circle gang. That brings us to welcoming our guest to this episode, our first returning guest to the podcast. So that must be a good sign that someone wanted to come back. But coming back from his infamous run on our Saltburn podcast, we are welcoming back the host of SlayerFest 98 and My Bloody Judy, Ian Carlos Crawford. Ian, welcome back to Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff. It's great to have you.
Hello, gentlemen. It's so great to be back. We're getting 3 tickets for Challengers, right? Is that what we're doing?
Oh, we're in. Make sure I'm in the middle, please and thank you. Yeah, exactly. And now, you saw the blush on YouTube. Now, everybody, Ian, just tell us about how life has been. How's life been treating you in the couple of months since we've had you on?
Good. X-Men has been like consuming my brain. It's like all I talk about, all I think about, and I've been covering it weekly on my show, and it's been a lot of fun. I've just been like, Steven, you and I talked a little bit before we started, but like, I really do feel like a kid again, where it's like, oh, 10-year-old me was this excited for this. Now 41-year-old me is this excited for this. But now I'm like, I have people to talk about it with, which is like so cool. Cause like when I was a kid, I didn't really know a lot of other nerds. Like I kind of was like the lone, like I had friends, but I remember even in like 4th grade when I was like, ooh, who's watching Star Trek? And everyone being like, what? And like I just kind of like had my nerdy stuff at home and like would play with my X-Men toys like myself. So it's like really cool having all these people to talk about it with. It's cool that like, I'm even talking about this episode twice. I talked about it on my podcast. I'm talking about it here. And like, I'm not tired of talking. Like, we could do this 3 more times.
Every single opportunity I have to talk about the show, and now that people in my life know that I talk about the show for fun on a podcast, so they are also keen on talking about it. So I am now the receiver of many memes, and just the internet is always 10 out of 10 the best at especially this show. So my breadth of content has expanded, and it's really nice to have a show like this sort of reappear. And monoculture is hard to say, but I think a lot of people are really hooking into it and getting into it. And so I totally agree with you. I was telling you earlier that I realized today that there's a new episode tomorrow because we're recording this on a Tuesday before part 2 comes out. So it's like, oh, you get that. When's the last time you felt that sort of like giddiness for something coming?
I agree, because this is water cooler TV. This show is built for you to talk about with your coworkers the next day. It always ends on a cliffhanger. This show has so little fat on it, and everything that happens in this show matters. Every piece of the puzzle has been thought out with such an insane level of foresight. It is crazy. I'm so impressed, and I also love that people who weren't the level of an X-Men fan that maybe the 3 of us were are now just getting as giddy as 10-year-old Ian and 10-year-old Charlie and 10-year-old Steve. So it feels like our inner child is being validated right now.
Well, that feels like a good place to just jump right into it. Let's get into this episode of X-Men 97. We're covering episode 8 in season 1, Tolerance is Extinction, part 1, released on May 1st, 2024, written by Bo DeMaio and Anthony Salitti, and directed by Chase Coy. And very general plot of this episode, because we're going to get deep into everything as the X-Men unite to face a new threat. And let's get into those intro credits. Now, the two things that I made sure that I caught for this one is that the voice of our previously on for this episode is Cyclops. So as Charlie likes to point out, the voice of the previously on for the episode is typically the emotional center of the episode. Daddy Scott is very much so centered in this episode, especially with his relationship with Cable and Jean. So we'll be seeing a lot of that. And we get Professor X included in the run of intro cards, but no Storm yet. I was a little bummed out to see no Storm yet, but I think by the end of this episode, we know that she's coming in hot in part 2. Hopefully, I feel like the people would riot. I know that the people would riot if she didn't come in for part 2. Ian, Charlie, either of you jump in here. Is there anything else in these intro credits that you noticed you wanted to call out? I know that these are always a treasure trove.
The people running away from the Sentinels are Prime Sentinels that we see throughout the episode in the opening credits. The like humans that have always been there that run away from the Sentinels before the X-Men and the villains like run at each other, they are all like Prime Sentinels that are in the episode, which I thought was
Look at you. That is a damn good catch. That's so impressive.
Damn, yeah.
That's not me. That is my co-host Brett White. He caught that immediately, and he like writes for Decider, and he was the first like person on the internet to like point that. I don't know how he knows.
Whoa.
That's nuts. Yeah, I didn't catch that. That's really, really good.
I mostly want to fast forward that part. I'm like, move, show me more Daddy Magnus.
Yeah, but I want him in his cute like M outfit.
I want him in his cute. I want him in less, but we can also do that. All right, so jumping into the episode, we have a shot of Scott watching people shooting bottles on the lawn. Charlie and I have gotten into the habit of watching a lot of YouTube content and people deep diving into this, and someone very hilariously called out that Cable didn't even lay a tarp down. He's just shattering glass all over the X lawn where Storm likes to hang out barefoot, so that's fucked up. But the point of it is that things are still icy between Cyclops and Cable. One of his superpowers seems to be disappearing from every room that I walk into was really good. And Jean just telepaths really hard this episode and uses it to give us a lot of exposition. So part of that exposition is how he was separated from Bishop in the time stream and ended up in the future, and that Scott overall just has a chance to be a good daddy, even though he feels bad about the past, you know, and Nightcrawler is going to essentially repeat this idea is that, you know, the past is the past, and he has this opportunity right now to create new memories with his son, even though he's being resistant right now. The downloads continue. Cable fills us in on Bastion, how he was created. All of the same Prime Sentinels that he's creating are infected with that same techno-organic virus that he was originally infected by Sinister with in the beginning of the series, so that connects all the way back to the beginning. To make matters worse, Beast theorizes that these are organic beings so they can reproduce, so they can create more Sentinels through doing the dirties. So one second they're playing Stevie Wonder, getting it on, and the next second they're popping out Prime Sentinel babies, shooting bursts of energy out of their hands. I completely lost the plot on that one, but we're just going to go with it. And it essentially explains this utopia, and I use heavy air quotes in non-video watchers, where humanity has all been upgraded by Bastion and mutants have been enslaved to create this utopian future for them. So where he's heading back, and he was originally trying to stop Genosha, but he's been trying to change this terrible future for mutants that Bastion has created. I'll let either of you jump in here about what we think of this sort of like premise download. X-Men 97 has not been shy about kind of driving straight through a wall of premise. Very Juggernaut-like, if that's a tease for later.
Well, so my one question that I have for y'all, which I still am unsure about, the internet has kind of assumed that Bishop lost him as a baby, but I had assumed that it was like they were coming back together and that's when they got separated.
That's what I assumed too. I think that Cable would have had a lot more shit to say if he got
Right?
separated
Yeah.
from Bishop as a baby. That would be a lot. I don't know how Cable would have survived, and we would have.
Right, he was an infant. Like,
He was an infant, you know.
He had to get healed. They had to get the virus out of him, or else he'd be some sort of Prime Sentinel adjacent, wouldn't he?
yeah. I think in the comics, it's like he uses his power to keep it. It's like that's why he has the one robot arm. But yeah, right. Like baby him wouldn't have known what to do because he was a baby, like literally just born. It seems like the internet has thought the other way, but I assumed it had to, because otherwise that baby would be dead, right? Like a baby just plops on the ground in the future.
I want to double click on Cable for a second too. I think another reason why I think Bishop is a huge influence on Cable is because Cable seems to have some of Bishop's style and his way of doing things. Like Bishop sometimes uses guns. Cable is all about guns, like even the way that they're dressed. So I think that is a mentor-mentee relationship that we haven't necessarily seen on this version of the show yet. But when it comes to Cable and just him like avoiding Scott and all of that, in my opinion, this is the most interesting I've ever seen Cable. Because when I was in the 90s as a kid, Cable just seems like he was made by a bunch of Marvel execs in a think tank to just sell action figures for not gay boys, for straight boys. Like, make him super jacked and big and give him a bunch of guns.
Why can't straight boys be represented too, Charlie?
Y'all have enough.
There's not enough straight boy representation.
I know, but whenever I would look at Cable as a kid, and I didn't like actively dislike him, I would just, my eyes would glaze over a little bit, because you see everybody with these amazing abilities and they're doing these cool things, and Cable's bursting in from the future with a gun. It almost feels like Cable belongs in a different franchise altogether. What are you doing in the X-Men? Like, even I had to, before this pod, look up what his powers are, because I forget what they are. He never does anything.
I feel like it's very like symptom of the 90s. Like a lot of the new characters that were introduced just were like dude with a big gun, and it's like, all right, but I don't really care about the dude with the big gun. I like the cool powers. Yeah, I Cable as a kid, Cable and Bishop more so landed for me a little bit because they gave him a little bit more. I think Cable felt like just like he came in and was a plot device, and that was kind of it in the cartoon.
I mean, my biggest Cable memory is Josh Brolin from Deadpool 2, so
He was cool.
It's not setting the bar incredibly high. He was brooding and pissed that his family was. I mean, they just fridged his family, so I don't know how interesting that makes him. It just makes him a trope in one way or another. But at least he could time travel, and he turned into a good guy by the end, I guess.
Yeah, I just like that Thanos played Cable. I was here for that.
It is so hard to separate those voices from each other. It's super funny.
And he calls him Thanos at one point, doesn't he?
He does.
I think he does. Oh my god, I can't wait for the next Deadpool movie. We could talk about that for 30 minutes easily, so let's not detour too hard into Deadpool versus Wolverine and stay here, which is Wolverine getting pissed at this Cable that he didn't go back and stop Genosha. And this leads us into, I mean, I can't say this is one of the, I could say this is one of the biggest moments of the episode, because we're going to have some really, really big moments towards the end of this episode, but this moment is really, really huge lore-wise and where it places this universe in the larger Marvel universe, which is Cable explains that he has returned to Genosha many times, too many times to count, enough to give up and essentially start here and try and fix it from after Genosha. Every time that they hit the past, they get temporally pulled back. And Beast theorizes that the mystics of Kamar-Taj, Doctor Strange magic, as we called it a couple episodes ago, when Forge was cracking that whip on the adversary, have said that there are these absolute points in time. And if you're an MCU fan and you watched What If, you recall the conversation that Supreme Strange has with the Ancient One, explaining these absolute moments in time as points in time that just can't be changed, or else there would be disaster for the universe. And so this really ties in the X-Men animated series to the MCU in some capacity. It explains why the Watcher was in the sky when we were ascending down on that shot to Genosha, because the Watcher typically is present for those absolute moments in time to pay witness to them, to kind of make sure that they happen. And I just loved how it really tied this X-Men animated series into the larger MCU. As someone who's loved the MCU from the beginning, peaks and valleys, all of it, whatever they're going to do with it moving forward, I'm just super interested to see what's going to happen with this. And I just love that little moment of contextualization. Some other things that it explains is a moment where Jean looks at Cable and has a moment where she realizes that Madeline felt happy when she died, because she realized that Cable was her son and she got to see her son alive. And again, I'm going to use heavy air quotes around well, but that, he made it, and that made her happy before she was blown up by the first initial explosion at the genocide of Genosha. So, and that overall Cable is here not to try and stop Genosha from happening, but to kill the person that killed his mother. Essentially, he's out for revenge. They sort of get interrupted by a newscast on television, and hey-oh, surprise, Charles is alive, he's on TV, and we get this moment of their just big old gobsmacked faces as they see Xavier on the television being like, the X-Men covered this up, and they're all just kind of like, hold on, time out, this guy's alive? So I actually want to hold on, time out, because Charlie, you knew that he was alive.
Yeah.
And if, I guess you watched the animated series back in the 90s and remember it, you would know that he's alive. But do the X-Men know that he's alive, is my question to you.
It's not no. I mean, I think they were the graduation day, season 5 of the original X-Men animated series. They all see him off with Lilandra to the Shi'ar Empire. So they know, but they don't speak about him like he's still alive. It's a very, I wish that I would have...
Yeah, they talk like he's dead.
They talk like he's dead, but maybe that's because of the separation that they need to make mentally. Maybe here's something that I wish the show would have done. I wish that they would have brought up Lilandra and how she was helping him, or if the technology would have actually helped him pull through. Like, I wonder if any of the X-Men felt a little skeptical of her having the ability to bring him back from nearly dying. And maybe somebody like Wolverine's like, I think old Chuck's dead. He would have said something or sent a message back to us from now. I can't believe he's been so quiet. Or maybe she wasn't able to do the thing that she was able to do. I think that I would have liked a little bit of gossip around what's going on with Charles. But I think that, again, the show's so jam-packed it didn't have the chance to do that. But that would have been nice.
I think the X-Men knew. They just didn't know, like, what state he was in. I feel like...
Sure.
Because, they saw him off. And I will say, Charlie, I was, like, very aware of the language they use. They never said dead. They would say gone. They would always say, not here anymore, he's gone. And, like, I was like, they're doing this on purpose because they know he's dead. But the writers are keeping it a surprise for us. In case. So, like, in that first episode, when Morph walks in and is Professor X, right? And Cyclops is like, don't be a creep. That was when I was like, okay, he's alive, because Cyclops would have been way more pissed.
You're right.
He was taking the form of, like, their basically dead father. Later in that episode, Wolverine is like, the worst thing about Professor being gone is having you here, Cyclops. And, like, that would read way harsher if he was like, the thing about our dad being dead that sucks is I have you. Like, that's, like, even worse. And it's less awful if it's like, he's just not here right now, but he's, like, getting groceries or getting cigarettes. So I do think they knew. I just think they, like... Because also, the thing that confused me with that, I was like, the news has videos of the Shi'ar Empire? Like, I was like, and we're just doing that on the news, and it's fine, okay. But, like, whatever, it's a universe with aliens, so sure. But yeah, no, I think that they very carefully used those words so that way the X-Men weren't. And there wasn't, like, a grieving or anything, so I kind of assumed that they knew, is where I went.
And maybe we'll get more download in the next episode, since we quite literally end with Charles returning to Earth, if that's not getting too far ahead of us. If you're here, you've watched the episode, hopefully multiple times like us. And so moving on from this moment, and we get Sunspot and Jubilee hanging out with Sunspot's problematic mom, who continues to pretend like she's trying her best, but is sprouting problematic views on mutants. That whole, one rat and apples not spoiling the whole bunch thing. Have we heard that one before? And she's simultaneously planning a benefit called Humans for Genosha, as if mutants aren't human. And Jubilee drops a hard "you people," capital Y, capital P, on her head and goes, hey, let's spend some of that trust fund money on some new clothes. For me, Jubilee slays. She knows herself, she knows her identity, and she isn't here for taking any shit from anyone who looks at her otherwise. And I think that's a very strong representation that, Sunspot continues to need to see.
Sunspot, through spending so much time with Jubilee, just progressively continues to step his bussy up and is always just really, I see growth in him in these last couple of episodes. I think just him...
Agree.
I was also really surprised that he got up and left the table with Jubilee. I didn't expect him to lean so much into pushing back against his mom as he did. That came as a surprise to me, and it also made me come around to his character more in a way that I wasn't expecting to.
I agree, Charlie. I thought that was going to be the thing, is Jubilee leaves and he's like, bye, I'm staying with my rich mom.
Right?
So it made me, I feel like, and Sunspot was more just the Jubilee placeholder in this, and has given Jubilee more to do, but that was a character development for Sunspot that was oh, now I totally fuck with him. I like him, and they are teenagers, so it's not I would have hated him if he stayed with his mom, because he's maybe 18, maybe 19, maybe 17, so it's he's a kid, but that made me fully like his character way more. And I thought it was an important development for both characters to see Jubilee. We finally are aging her up, right? She's not supposed to be 12 anymore. And I like the idea of her more coming into her own, getting confident, because she is my girl. And Charlie, I'm curious what you boys I liked. So sometimes Marvel does a thing I don't love, where they're being progressive, but the way they make it not anger conservatives is the person delivering the progressive message is all to people of color, so that way it doesn't look like they're talking to, and I hate that. But this worked for me because I come from a Latin family, and there are people that would consider themselves more liberal because they are POC, or because they're part of a minority group, but actually aren't. And I kind of liked that representation of the mom would absolutely not she would probably call herself liberal or progressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's hosting a charity benefit for mutants, but then is but not in my house. And I liked the nuance there. She probably would be someone who's I don't like Republicans, I don't like Trump, but then does shit like that. And I think that's a fun, not fun, but a good layer to bring to that.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I think it's fun because it makes the viewing experience more real, and it makes it more of a satisfying watch, which I think you meant. I completely agree, and I want to yes and what you said. I enjoy that scene for the intersectionality of race and class, because while Roberto and his mom are Brazilian and they're part of that culture, they are also wealthy. When you come from a certain class, you're always trying to keep up with the Joneses. So if you are rich to a certain extent, you're pretty much an honorary white person, because that's the level of privilege that you're able to get. And I think that she didn't want to take that blow to what their family wealth was, because that was one of their strongholds into a higher society that otherwise would not have space for them. So I think that was definitely her protecting her class. And Roberto also has those instincts inside of him, but we're seeing him start to get he's getting unmoored from his upbringing in a way that maybe he didn't expect. Just one more point. I wanted to kick the ball over to Ian again. You know who Jubilee reminded me of a little bit in this scene? Dawn fucking Summers. Like,
I was like, is he gonna say Dawn?
Oh, baby. This is why we're on this. This is why I like you.
On your Buffy bandwidth.
On my Buffy bandwidth. This was giving like season 7 Dawn. The thing about Dawn and the thing about Jubilee, and the reason why at first it took me a while to come around to both of those characters, is because their bucking against authority or their brattiness was a little bit ill-timed. Like, Jubilee bucking against the X-Men was always annoying because they were in the middle of working and trying to do something, and it was just like, Jubilee, stop, we're trying to do a thing right now. She's like, I want to help, I'm an adult. But seeing her being an adult and seeing her refine that assertiveness and having a backbone and turning it against somebody like Roberto's mom was such a stand-up and cheer moment, and it's such a good use of something about her character that I just found to be so annoying and making it heroic and powerful.
I gotta say, Charlie, I feel like I pick up your like verbiage so much. I said yes, and I think on the last podcast I recorded for SlayerFest, I like double click. I'm gonna use it. You must be a writer. I think Jubilee, I talked to Allison Court, who was the original voice of Jubilee, and I was telling her that as a kid, this was kind of me projecting as well, but as a kid, I always thought Jubilee was Puerto Rican, because I was like, oh, well, she's kind of sassy. Oh, like, she wears bright colors. We have the same coloring. I also have the, same kind of hair as her. And, like, because, as a kid, I didn't pick up on the fact that she was, because they didn't really address it in the cartoon, that she was supposed to be, Chinese American. And so I just assumed she was Puerto Rican because I felt like I was that bratty, like, 12-year-old, but at 10 watching the cartoon, and I wanted to be the cool kid who got to hang out with the cool adults. Mm-hmm. And I felt that I was like, I could hang with adults. I could be the, like, cool kid that does that, but could not have been. And so I think it was just, like, she was my, like, entrance into the X-Men. Like, I was, like, with her as she, like, met them. So I just always have, like, such a soft spot for her in my heart where, like, kid Ian wanted to be her. I was always bummed they never like released an action figure of her in her 90s outfit until, a few years ago.
Marvel Legends.
And like I always thought her, like, I don't know, she was very 90s and I was very 90s. I mean, I still am. Look at what I'm wearing. And like all of that just endeared me to her like forever. It was like I imprinted on her. And I just always, even when it's like she's not doing much, I'm still always rooting for her. And this, like, really for me was a really good moment for her, even more so than we got in the Jubilee episode. I liked that episode, was cute, but this for me was more like her grown-up moment, where it's like she's gonna put this adult in her place. She is correct, and also she's like, let's go spend her money. Like, I love it.
From there, we smash back to the mansion where we have Jean caring for an unconscious Rogue with Kurt, and Jean is psychically helping to ease some of her pain and anguish. And they speak about Madeline and how her memories feel real to her, and how even the most recent ones, Nathan kicking in her belly, the actual birth, all of it feel like her actual memories, even though we know at that point it wasn't her. And Kurt, Nightcrawler, continues to be not just an emotional pillar of this series ever since he came back in. He just, like, again, I said this in one of the last episodes, I just think net value pound for pound, like per 30, if I'm going to make a sports ball reference, Nightcrawler's got some of the best lines in the series and delivers them in some of the best ways in the series so far. And Nightcrawler was always one of my favorites back in the day for his power set, which is amazing, which we're going to see here very, very soon. But he's got this really, really great dialogue. Blood is blood and family is a choice.
So one of my friends was like, I felt like that was a little bit like, we already know that. And I was like, yeah, but I do think, like, just from, I feel like I mention this all the time. The comments on every X-Men post is a nightmare on Instagram.
Really?
And it's always, yeah, it's like, it's been getting better, but there's always a handful of people being like, oh, what are you talking about? Oh, you're reading too much into X-Men. And like people that like fully miss the point or intentionally miss the point. And I was like, well, I do think they needed to say that because it also felt organic. Yes, it's something like a lot of queer folks already know, but I think it mattered that he said it right then when they were literally talking about family. So it was appropriate. And yeah, it's like the context becoming text, but I don't know, it worked for me. I'm curious, Charlie, did it? How did you feel?
It worked for me because Jean needed to hear it. I think Jean, not only did she need to hear it, she deserved to hear it. I think that Jean and Kurt play similar roles in the X-Men, whereas Jean is more the soul of the X-Men. I think Kurt represents faith and hope. So together, I think that they really, I love that pairing of them together, actually, because I think that they have a similar way of thinking about things and a similar softness and tenderness to them that is appreciated. Whoa. Would they make a good couple? Do I ship that? Maybe I do. Huh.
I'm still Team Logan.
I don't
know. I don't care how problematic it is.
It's not problematic. It's hot. But I think, Kurt and Jean are a vibe. I like the vibe that they had with each other and the conversation they were able to have. I think Kurt, without being a telepath, knows the right thing to say. And Jean is somebody who has an idea of what to say.
Kurt has gone to therapy for sure. He's very in tune with his emotions. He's worked through his trauma. He's made peace with the people who have harmed him in the past, and he's really gripped on to the family that he's found as a result through all that work that he's done. My dude has definitely been hitting up his virtual therapy through the lockdown and all that good stuff, and continued to do so after we got to go outside again. So kudos to him. And Jean takes his advice almost immediately and grabs Cyclops and Cable, and they head out on the jet to go after Cable's lead, which ends up being Bastion's hometown in Harmony, Pittsburgh, is where they lead back to. And also, as they fly off, there's a mob gathered in front of the mansion protesting the X-Men and their discretions to hide the fact that Professor X was alive from the public, to gather sympathy for the mutant cause. If we remember why that's a big deal, the humans are pissed because the mutants got a lot of sympathy from the normie community by playing off that Charles was killed by Henry Gyrick. And also, total coincidence, right? Gyrick, that guy, found dead in Mexico. What a coincidence. Charles is alive and Gyrick's dead. It's almost like Gyrick worked for Boeing or something. Meanwhile, as the trio get to the house, that traitorous goddamn bitch, Val Cooper, reveals herself to be in league with Mr. Sinister, who freely tells her of his intentions to kind of like go off from the side of Bastion. She seems to start showing guilt towards the fact that, Magneto's locked up, that Genosha happened at all. Another person to say that I didn't know it was going to be so much of a massacre of mutants. And Magneto's giving her the silent treatment, and it's giving her going crazy about it. And how often have you seen someone who knows that they're wrong about something beg the person that they've wronged to just say anything to them? I personally have been guilty of being the person on the other end of this. I've been the Val Cooper in this situation, but have you guys ever experienced being on either end of this?
No, baby, no. That's
Charlie, I'm
listen,
too good
man.
for that.
Listen.
That suck.
We all fuck up sometimes.
We all do.
Okay?
Maybe
Steven, clearly I'm assuming you, not in the way of like kidnapping someone, but in the way of like, oh, I fucked up. Like, I'm really sorry.
Nobody died.
To me. Right. Yeah. But like,
Yeah.
oh, like that maybe was shitty what I did. Like, I'm really, really sorry. And then the person gives you, I had a friend do this and it like devastated me. One of my best friends, I like fully apologized. I don't even remember what it was. And they like didn't respond to my text for a week. And I was like, oh my God, does a friend break up?
I've experienced that. Like, I think everybody has experienced. I thought in my head, I was picturing somebody damn near naked on a cross. And like I experienced it to the extreme of Daddy Madness, and like it just being super, like I was
What?
Shut up, Steven, let me have this.
So you just pictured me strung up in a black Speedo on an X cross. That's what you.
So Steven,
that's what I always
we'll play
picture.
it out for Charlie.
Yeah, boys, come on.
This took a turn, and I'm here for it.
That's exactly what I was picturing. But I've experienced this. I had one situation with somebody I barely knew, and then I had a situation with a friend like you, Ian, and they circled back 4 days later, not quite a week, but by then I was like, oh, we're not friends, because I was doing like a really big check-in And the check-in fell on deaf ears for a while, to at which point I'm like, oh, so you pretty much answered my question and me seeing if we were okay or not. Also, it seemed like as soon as we cut to Val Cooper coming in, she already made up her mind that she was going to release Magneto. If she was going to release him so quickly, why have her be bad in the first place? It made such little sense to me that she would have gone along with this having been that sympathetic. Like, from jump, just feeling, was she just that deeply unaware of the mutant massacre and what it would be?
This is skipping forward a little bit, but it's clear in a lot of the dialogue that Bastion generally has had the wool pulled over everyone's eyes. Sinister didn't know that Genosha was going to happen like it did. Val clearly didn't know. When we get to the council meeting, none of them knew that Genosha was going to go down. And there are some like big players in that room that we're going to talk about later. So it's like, if those people didn't know, I'm not surprised that Val Cooper didn't know. And I think the show also makes a point of Val making very clear that she was undersold on what Bastion was doing. They wanted new Sentinel program, more control over the mutant threat that's clearly rising here, and I do think that she was playing both sides and getting and like having Magneto become the leader was a wrinkle in her plan and stuff like that. But I think all of this was sort of trying to wrangle them into one place, and I think it was by Bastion's direction, and this was like the control that humanity wants over mutants. Bastion was taking it a step forward the whole time and not letting anybody know about it, and Val is seemingly much like Trask was, having a consciousness come out of nowhere about it all, which I agree with, that it's quick. But I do think that the show is making a point of like Bastion had the proverbial curtain pulled over everybody's eyes.
I was fine with buying Val Cooper. At this point, I will say I had a little bit more trouble with Trask suddenly having a conscience than Val Cooper, just because like Trask, I don't know, this is what he's always done, so like
definitely wanted to kill all the mutants.
Yeah, like I don't know, dude, that's always been your like issue, so why are you suddenly upset about it? Val Cooper, I don't know, she's a side character, so I'm not as like bothered, but I would have liked just a little inkling of, because she seemed to, unlike Trask, she didn't always, like, we were presented with her as like an ally. She's trying her best, you know, she's still like in the government and still trying to like work within the system and blah, blah, blah. But she didn't seem like someone who would go along with any kind of whatever plan. But yeah, Steven, to your point, I am kind of like, well, Bastion pulled the wool over Mr. Sinister's eyes. So like clearly it's supposed to be she didn't think it would be, whatever she signed up for was not what they got. And I do think she's going to become a Prime Sentinel. I mean, she was wearing the frickin' outfit from the comics in this episode. And I do think, well, I trust the writing enough that either it won't matter by the end or we'll get a little bit more of an explanation, because she did give that really, I was even a little bit like, what are we doing with Val Cooper? She's a Prime Sentinel, right? That's why she went along with this. And I kept thinking, because I was very much on board with the she's Mystique theory.
Me too.
But now that we know that she's not, I'm like, well, maybe she's a Prime Sentinel, but then she wasn't. But I'm assuming he turns her into one. But
probably now.
Yeah, but I don't know. I liked her speech so much, and I also like that Magneto did not bring her. She released him, and he was like, "Stay blessed, girl," and just flew away and left her to die, basically. But I understand why he would do that, because it's you were even there and you let this happen. You're good. Stay with Sinister and Bastion. Good luck.
He spared her. That's how I read it, as him just being like, you release me, so I'm not gonna strip all the fucking iron out of your blood like I did in X2. So bye.
Back to the mansion. Beast gets paid a visit from the one and only Trish Tilby. She's got coffees and an apology. The coffee featured on there is actually the coffee place that's right across the street from Avengers Tower. previously featured in the old Avengers animated series from the 90s. Yeah, the show is tying in all of the old cross-universe stuff, which is amazing. And that Beast is experimenting on Trask's Sentinel husk, which Tilby is like, I'm not here as a journalist, but you keeping this body down here instead of the government is pretty juicy stuff. Hey, fuck you, Trish. God. I went to too many of you. I went to school with too many of those people at Emerson in the journalism program. But we get a little bouncing back and forth here where we head right back to Harmony. The trio discover Bastion's mother inside of his old childhood home. She's like, oh, you're a day early. That's not creepy. And leads them upstairs to his old room where we get a little bit more download on Bastion, where Nimrod's consciousness somehow survived after he was destroyed back in the early 90s series, and it infected his father with that original strain of the techno-organic virus, which then when his father got down and dirty with his mother, they created Bastion, essentially like a synthetic Sentinel who's also a mutant that could hear machines and was getting messages from Master Mold, essentially being like, you're going to be the most powerful mutant. He's essentially descended from all of the Sentinels that's ever been, including Master Mold and Nimrod. And honestly, like, I wasn't sure how they were going to explain this, but when they did, I was like, yeah, okay. If we're talking about just like comics lore, quick cartoon, like, yeah, this is how it happened. It actually happened in a very specific moment back in the 90s animated series, where if you watch the old series, you would get a like, oh yeah, I can go back and kind of see what they're pulling from to bring us into this moment. I thought it was actually like both very quick and very much so made sense in a way that I was actually less confused walking away from it, which I feel like superhero shows are bad at doing sometimes.
You know what this also provided for me? It really, and I thought it a little bit on Bright Eyes, episode 7 of the show. I really like the Prime Sentinels for X-Men 97 because they're a really great metaphor of what it means to lose your humanity when you give in to hate of another part of the human race. So I think...
Ooh, Charlie, that's good.
Yeah, that's fucking deep,
like,
dude.
it really... They're turning into Prime Sentinels because that's what it's like when you become a bigot and you become less human when you want other humans to be eradicated for whatever reason. So you you lose a part of yourself, and humans gave themselves over to this experiment so that they could keep up, but what they really did was just take away their own ability to grow and to be in control of their actions, because when you give in to hate, you're not really acting as yourself per se. You are part of a hive mind. You are part of this mob mentality. You are like the fucking morons on 1/6. So I think this is a very apt metaphor for the show to be playing around with.
And to dig a little further into that metaphor, usually that switch happens unwittingly and unwillingly. It just kind of happens to you when you start thinking like that, and all of a sudden you've transformed into this different thing, which we'll get to is sort of what's happening to these people that opt into this program thinking that they're going to be bettering humanity. And in that meeting that we talked about a little bit earlier, we get that meeting between all of the masters of evil here, and Val starts pressing Bastion about not telling anybody about Genosha, and we get a casual appearance of Dr. fucking Doom, which was my first holy shit moment of the episode.
I was gooped.
Where... Yeah, like actually, to quote one of our other former guests, I was literally gagged, quite literally. Shout out to Billy LaRusso. And we also get Baron Zemo in his OG comics animated series outfit. We get that character whose silhouette could be Killmonger. We get a woman's voice in there as well. So we see that there is this whole council, and there's all of these other screens displaying people's faces. And the general gist of that, I think actually something that Bo DeMaio said, is that those are just general leaders of the human race. Those are just leaders of nations. So like this organization runs very deep. This, separation between humanity and mutants is much deeper than I think we originally thought it was, coming off of the 90s animated series coming into X-Men 97. And we've got some pretty heavy hitters on this council doing their thing here. What did you guys think about this reveal?
I'll say this again at the end when we talk about the other cameo, but like this feels very comic book to me, and I appreciate it. I know people can complain about cameos, but that is true to comics, where like, yeah, Doctor Doom is in one panel with one line because there's like a meeting of evil people or whatever, and that I love. And that's what the original animated series did a lot of, where there'd be like a blip of a character, because back then no one owned anything and Marvel was like, do whatever you want, so they could do this for other reasons, and now they can again because it's under Disney. And yeah, I just love that.
I love them giving us just enough of those cameos without making it a thing. Like with Captain America, we saw him for a second and it wasn't a thing. And I think that is just, that's what it's like if you share a universe with somebody. Just like if you live in New York City, you bump into somebody that you know on the subway and you have a quick kiki with them, then you're off at different stops. It's very quick and it doesn't change the course of your day, but that's what it's like when you're sharing a universe. It makes all of this feel very, very real.
Totally agree. And Bastion was like, yeah, we can keep Val around, you know, I'll make sure she's in the know from here on. I'll even throw in a tour. I thought that was such a throwaway line the first time, but then I realized that he actually takes her on a tour afterwards and shows her the Sentinel facility and explains the process of creating the Prime Sentinels, which we explained a little bit before. He sort of omits some of the gorier details. He's quite literally like gutting these people and upgrading them while still keeping their thoughts and their memories and all of that stuff. And they're built to be activated when a certain thing happens. Back in Harmony, Bastion's mother starts showing the trio paintings that he's painted back when he was a kid, including his best painting, as she calls it, back when he was 16, is this painting of a 3-headed master mold. You ever heard of it? And other Sentinels presiding over defeated mutants, the destruction of mutants, and Prime Sentinels presiding over them. This is the moment, as they're looking at this painting, that the Prime Sentinels start to activate. So one by one, starting with Bastion's mother, we get a terminate mutants from her. At the mall, we get Jubilee's Generation X fit, and then shortly after, the butler turns into one of those Prime Sentinels and charges out his hands. And last but not least, and Beast is just finishing up his test to see how many Prime Sentinels there are, and suddenly the whole fucking globe is lighting up with red lights. And in that moment, I was like, goddamn, Trish is a Sentinel. And you see him reach her hand in and pull his hand away, and she's a fucking Prime Sentinel. I was so sad for Beast. I was so sad for Beast, man, because you could tell that there were problems, but they were crushing on each other. But the whole time, she was a bigot. She was a goddamn mutant hater, and she turns into a Prime Sentinel. What did you guys think of this Prime Sentinel reveal?
This reminded me of... All right, so there's this quote that I always use because I think it explains racism to people who think that racism is just getting rid of one bad apple in the bunch. And it's like, oh, they were a racist in this situation, but nobody else here is racist. And this quote says, racism is not the shark, it's the water. And that always gets me. Like, you cannot escape racism, sexism, homophobia. Like, you can't escape these things because they're so cooked in to society that even people whose identities those things attack also have some of those things inside of them. And the reason why I can buy, because I feel two different ways about there being so many Prime Sentinels. And I'm going to say why it works for me on a metaphorical level. On a metaphorical level, it works for me, and I buy it because I think that there is bigotry in everybody on some level. And at some point, it could just get activated. Like, for example, in episode 7, when Trish said, oh, I understand the mutant cause, but property damage? Really? Why? You know, that was a bit of misguided bigotry coming out that she, again, corrected because she wants to do better. But I thought that this was very terrifying because it showed everybody becoming... everybody giving way to their bigotry and just those savage instincts. On a writing level, I don't get how this would have been done so quietly with so many people.
I'm wondering about that, if there's gonna be, because we saw him when he's giving Val the tour, Bastion, that like they went through like a process. I feel like there had to have been an expedited way of doing this because that process seemed pretty lengthy.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's gonna have to be something where it's like, also, I put it in a bunch of like needles on drones and threw them into the city, and whoever they landed on got it, because I agree with and appreciate everything you said, Charlie, but in my heart, because I like Beast, I'm like, I want it to be that she was like, she didn't willingly die.
Right,
I want it to be like,
right.
she was injected with it just because of that. But you are correct in everything you said, but like, the like nerd in my heart is like, oh, but I want Beast to like have this nice like Gail Weathers girlfriend.
I mean, Bastion makes it very clear that they didn't know that. I don't think these people went into this program knowing that they were going to be essentially dead after they come out of it. Yeah. And I can see, if we go back to the conversation that Trish has with Beast on Genosha, it ends with him kind of be like, well, fuck you then.
Yeah.
Like, maybe asking for your tolerance was our first mistake. And I can see her walking away from that being like, oh yeah, these people are pissed. I need to protect myself. So because she was already feeling a little, iffy about the property damage. So she's like, oh yeah, they mean business. I need to kind of get ready. So again, there's two more parts. I think there's a chance for them to really flesh out how some of this came to be, or maybe they won't.
I mean,
we'll be
if
talking about it at
anybody's
the
going to
end.
be a bigot, it shouldn't be Trish. She can take several fucking seats. I mean, she is on her way to coming out, to being a furry. I'm here for that journey. I don't think that she's aware yet. She's figuring something out about herself. I'm gonna be there when she realizes it. I'm gonna be there. But yeah.
Oh my goodness, that was too good. I don't know why I wasn't expecting that. How we haven't made that joke yet. So we're gonna get into the big fight. This is just, I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It jumps back and forth a bunch. We're gonna go between kind of all three of the scenes here. We start with Jean, Cyclops, and Cable flying off in the Blackbird. They kind of start the fight by running away from the fight because they're clearly very outnumbered, and they remember from the last time they fought one Prime Sentinel that it kind of washed them until they could get their hands on that electromagnetic grenade. Sunspot and Jubilee flee as more humans turn Sentinel in the mall. Jubilee yelling, "I'm totally done with malls," was an amazing callback to the first episode of the animated series. And obviously, just like, yes, you should be done with malls after everything that happens to you with Sentinels there. Sunspot openly using his powers here, blowing people up with the power of the sun. I'm unclear if this version of Sunspot has super strength. Maybe they'll explain it more, but one thing he can do, we'll talk about much sooner. And I want to slow down at this next moment because this is potentially one of my favorite scenes of the entire series so far, and that's starting with Rogue still unconscious in bed with just this creepy shot from outside the window of all of the Prime Sentinels standing over her bed, which I think really, upon second watch through, really hits you hard because it goes from this loud moment in the mall to all of a sudden it's silent and they're just staying there quietly. And then Wolverine comes in, Nightcrawler comes in, and they have this moment of defending her and using Nightcrawler with his teleportation and his swords and Wolverine with his claws. They're tearing apart these Sentinels, and they realize that they can't kill them, but they can get them out of the room away from Rogue. So we start getting these moments of Nightcrawler zooming in and out, taking them to different places, and we actually get one of the coolest scenes in the entire series of Wolverine with his claws and a Sentinel as Nightcrawler is pulling them through into the roof. And you see Wolverine's arms stretch out and all that stuff, and then Nightcrawler just kind of like looks back at him, just kind of like, yeah, I did that. That's what I do all the time. It's casual, my dude. Really, really cool moment. Definitely one of the coolest fight scenes that the show's put forward so far.
My like YouTube reaction video during that scene is me going, "This is so cool. This is cool." Like, Kid Me would have ate this up so much, but adult me still did. Like, adult me was just like, like I had a big smile on my face. It was such cool action. And Nightcrawler, it is wild that he did not appear until like 2 episodes ago in this series, and he has quickly become the heart, the soul, and the badass. I said I have a soft spot for Jubilee. I have a soft spot for Nightcrawler too, because when X2 came out, I was assistant manager at a movie theater, and I was like in charge of promo, and I was like, I loved X-Men, so I was so happy to be in charge of promo. We did a lot of dumb shit, and one of them was the day of release. 4 of us dressed as X-Men. I wanted to be Wolverine, but this is me getting revenge as an adult. The other like 20-year-old that worked there was like pretty muscly. So my boss was like, no, he has to be Wolverine. You could be Nightcrawler. And I was like, I have to get blue paint. So I was painted in blue from head to toe for a whole shift at work, which was miserable. And then we went to the mall to like pass out coupons for the movies. And because the X-Men weren't well known, someone called the police on us to say there's someone dressed as a demon.
Stop.
And some guy holding knives.
Can't believe you would do
Ian
blueface in
is
public
also
like that, man.
totally over malls. Ian, they weren't cops,
Yes.
They were Prime Sentinels.
Yes. So, like, I loved seeing my little blue elf baby boy get his due justice. This week, I have Adrian Huff, who is the voice of Nightcrawler, as, like, my voice actor guest. And I actually specifically asked him about, I was like, I gotta ask because I kept in my brain hearing Nightcrawler say, nine. Like, no. But like he says 9 because he's like, no, my friend, 9, when Wolverine says I got 6 reasons. And he was like, before I even finished, he went, yes, I played that on purpose as a pun, as like you could read it as me saying both. He was like, because Wolverine wasn't alone, but also like he's saying no to these people. And yeah, man, everything about it looked so cool. The teleportation is not something I had like given much thought to, but it looked fucking cool. The fact that like they are done their fight, you feel like they've defeated everyone, they're on the roof, and then there's just an army more. And the shot of them panting is so good because it's like these 2 badass warriors that have been like fighting for their life in this like beaten down on fire mansion where they live. They've now gotten out of like hell to only see there's way more coming. And I just thought it was such a cool shot. And so like, it was like my baby's last stand. Like these 2 men were like, all right, this is it. We're going to still keep going. And I just like, I could cry. That's like, I love both those characters. I loved seeing that. I always appreciate that kind of moment. And I know X-Men does stuff like that a lot, but in this cartoon, we haven't gotten a moment where, aside from like Rogue and Gambit, where it feels like this is our last fight, but we're going to keep doing it. And I don't know. I just loved it.
I totally agree.
I loved it too. And Nightcrawler, fucking, as soon as he got knocked back into that bookcase and the 2 swords fell down, I was like, ooh, they done fucked up now. I
was like, you better pick those up.
And fun nerdy fact, Ian, I always tell Steve that my favorite video game of all time, which I'm going to start replaying this week, is X-Men Legends on PS2, because you can customize your characters. And in X-Men Legends, the first one, Nightcrawler, he doesn't have his swords. In X-Men Legends 2, he gets 2 swords, and he is able to upgrade it to do blood damage, so that when he slashes it, you actually see blood come out of the enemy, and the enemy progressively loses health. And that's the version of Nightcrawler that I saw in this, and it kind of made me connect to that. Yes, and this is the only time in a cartoon, I believe, that we've seen Wolverine actually stab someone with his claws. That's never happened before.
He was tearing through those people.
He was stabbing Trish in the back, and I was so here for it. And it's to Bo DeMaio and the show's credit that I was cheering for Wolverine when he was falling through the sky, because he is just one of the ensemble, and he hasn't been hogging all the glory of the fight scenes.
Yeah, and I did skip over that moment of when Trish first goes Sentinel. She kind of bursts through the roof of the mansion, and we do get that amazing scene of Wolverine sort of dive bombing through the air with no parachute, straight back through the roof of the mansion, and we know he can handle it because he's got that magic healing ability. But yeah, cutting Sentinels in half. And I agree with you that his one big moment was very overdue, because he really just had the getting charged up by Gambit and taking out that first Master Mold in the first episode, and he hasn't had much of like a holy shit moment after that. So it was good to have that moment with him and have it with Nightcrawler.
One more thing before we move on, can we just? I love Morph so much, but our girl can't fight to save their damn life. It doesn't matter.
Maybe that's why he's not the most powerful X-Men, because he has no idea how to handle his powers. And that if he was more confident, then maybe he would be more dangerous.
How do you get bodied when you turn into Juggernaut? I don't understand. I think it was somebody, maybe Mando on Mando Watch on that YouTube channel, they're like, one of the X-Men needs to pull Morph aside and say, hey, do you see Wolverine? Do you see Nightcrawler? They have one power and they're really good at it. Buddy, do you maybe want to just focus on one morph and get really good at that instead of, because I will say the one time that I saw Morph really keeping an enemy on the ropes was in episode 2 when they were fighting the Executioner. I think for Morph to be really good at their power, they have to juggle between a bunch of different morphs to be unpredictable, because if they just do one, it's kind of laughable. It's kind of funny at this point, funny and sad.
So you're saying that Morph is a third year undecided student, basically.
Pretty much.
Is that he's been taking a lot of liberal arts classes and not really getting into anything else. He's really into his a cappella group, and that's, now I'm just talking about myself. Okay, moving on. We go back to Sunspot and Jubilee, where Jubilee is running away from the Prime Sentinels on a roof, jumps off of said roof, doesn't know how she's gonna survive that one, and gets caught by Sunspot, who can fly. Surprise, he can fly. We knew that he can fly, but he hadn't shown that his ability to fly yet. Jubilee reacts very fittingly. She's like, oh god, you too? You could, like, literally everybody can fly except for me. Are you kidding me? Which was amazing. And he was like, yeah, I was actually going to surprise you. I've been practicing in the danger room, which I think is really cute. That's like when you've been secretly practicing how to, like, salsa dance or something like that for your partner, or like ballroom dance or something like that, and you bust it out in a public place. So I thought that was really sweet, and another indication that Sunspot's starting to think of other people other than himself. And we cut right back up into another flying situation where we lose another Blackbird, which Jean, first of all, telepathically clips Cable's seatbelt on him, which was very incredibly stepmom-like, which I loved, or I guess mom-like. I don't know. Are we calling Jean the stepmom? I guess she's like the mom, the second mom, something like that.
She's his chosen mom,
and she's the mom that stepped up. That's what we're gonna go with.
Stepped up mom.
And so she also very rightfully goes to Scott that, like, you know, Hank's gonna kill you. This is the third Blackbird in as many months, but he doesn't really care. He just wants to get in his Porsche, which he drives out of the exploding Blackbird, which is amazing. Fun fact, the license plate says Slim SL1M, which is one of Scott's original nicknames in the comics in his earliest continuity. He was called Slim a lot. And together the trio have this amazing family moment where you got Scott driving and Jean protecting the car with her physical ability, busting through mountains, making it fly, and Cable hanging off of the back, shooting Sentinels as they drive away from them. And, you know, they go flying through the air, and then we smash into Sunspot and Jubilee also flying through the air. They crash into the humans for Genosha, those douchebags benefit, and they claim that the Sentinels are trying to kill them. The Sentinels immediately power down, and we find out that one of their other superpowers is the power of gaslighting, where they then tell the party, it's like, no, we're not here to kill you. We're here to save you. We're here to save mutants from themselves and being a danger to other people. And we get the ultimate betrayal of being a bad person by Sunspot's mom, where he was just like, go with the men. Jubilee and Sunspot are collared up and they are taken away. Now, before we head into the finale of the episode, do you want to talk about just anything else that I've skipped over here? We just covered sort of a lot all in that moment.
I loved the Summers family moment. Jean continues to shine as not the punk that she was in the original show. That's my girl. The moment with Roberto catching Jubilee was very cool. For a second, it looked like she had an idea of how she would catch herself from falling. And I hope that we see that again, because if she can propel herself with those blasts and make them really powerful, I think that would be a good way for her to have short burst of agility. I think that would be cool.
That would be really fun if it was foreshadowing for her figuring out how to fly in some capacity. I didn't think about that as an option. That'd be fun. Well, let's roll on to this finale. Bastion is standing, presiding over a burning mansion where Sinister phones him in and calls that Val has let Magneto out of his capture back at the base. He apparently has the power of teleportation because he's almost immediately back at his base where Val is. He strings her up, and that's where we get this incredible speech from Val about how, you know, no one really seemed shocked or surprised, and how we've all become numb to this horrific violence that continues to be perpetuated in the world, and that Genosha is just another in the long list of horrors that we do to each other in the name of one thing or another, and that at the end of the day, and I can't overstate this enough, Magneto is right. And what a moment for the show to make a clear statement like that. And you show her letting Magneto out as she's making this speech. You see Magneto slowly floating up to the North Pole in nothing but that Daddy Magnus Speedo. And he uses the polarity of the North Pole, that it's enhanced magnetism. He utters the one word, enough, and sends a gigantic electromagnetic pulse that shuts down all of the electricity in the entire world. Do you think that's going to have some consequences, my friends?
Airplanes.
That's rhetorical. It's going to have some consequences. Your grandma that's on life support, not going to be living for much longer. I hate to say it. But yeah, so this also defeats the entire army of Prime Sentinels, and it's going to have incredible ramifications on the real world. As Wolverine describes later, it is an act of war that Magneto has declared on the world. Even though he did save the mutants in that moment, he also did in fact declare war on humanity by the fact that so much collateral damage had to have been caused to the planet. And we get cameos that I just was not ready for. We get different parts of the universe reacting to this absolute gigantic event, and I think the one that we need to stop and talk about right away is the inclusion of our good neighborhood friend Spider-Man, flipping through the air, seeing the lights of New York getting shut down, reacting to it with his big animated Spider-Man eyes. What was the pitch of the scream? Did you break the dB meter? Were your dogs looking at you in weird ways because only they could hear it? That was probably what happened on my end. Y'all, I freaked the fuck out. I had to rewind because I just didn't see the rest of it because I was too busy freaking out.
Yeah, also you called it a couple episodes ago. You were like, is Spider-Man going to show up? You? I think Steve did.
I called that the Avengers are coming in some way. And now I think the Avengers might be coming as adversaries to the X-Men.
Yes, I think we are leading to that. I think we are leading to, if it's not Avengers per se, it'll be like a group of pre-established superheroes in that universe, or like something that I think will show up as adversaries and then be like, oh wait, and help them. I think all of this is leading to the X-Men breaking up, and we're gonna like break off into different factions. I think we might have touched upon that, Charlie, when you were on SlayerFest, but that's especially after this episode. Val Cooper's speech made me hope she doesn't die. Like, I was like, okay, that was a really good speech. I kind of hope we like keep her around because that was really good. I do think she's Prime Sentinel dust by now, but that made me like her. I liked that she, she's basically like strung up about to die and is like, listen, motherfuckers, Magneto was right. I hate all of you. Do your worst. That made me like gain back some more like respect for her. And because we don't know like the severity of whatever she agreed to or what she thought was going to go on. But I do think the X-Men, this is like fully going to lead to other superheroes that aren't mutants coming in to either fight against them or help them in some kind of way. But I do think like we're seeing Captain America, we saw Spider-Man. I do think, it's fine if they don't, right? But I do think that would be cool if they came in not as the main focus, but like at the end in like a big battle type thing.
I feel like we have to see Spider-Man again. I feel like he's going to be swinging over to X-Mansion being like, what the hell happened? And maybe act as more of an intermediary between any Avengers that show up and the X-Men, which now that we're talking this out is something that I just thought about could be a possibility. We also get the Silver Samurai reacting to all the lights shutting down around him. The Silver Samurai did show up in the X-Men animated series back in the early 90s, so we might see him popping up again. And we also see a nuclear plant holding one Omega Red shut down. Everyone's flipping the fuck out over that facility going down. I do hope and wish and pray that we get more Spider-Man sooner than later.
Yeah, I don't know what. Honestly, I'm on the edge. You see a girl? This is me. You see me? Do you see me? I'm on the edge.
Squeeze a little bit.
I'm just on the edge of my titties.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
Cut that
perfect.
out. Cut that out. No.
Hell no. Hell no.
I'm kidding. Leave it in. But I just think I'm on the edge of my seat. I genuinely don't know what's gonna happen. I know what I would like to happen, and what I would like to happen is that I don't think the world can be mad at Magneto for what he did, because one,
I mean, it will be.
They will be, but like, let's look at it. Let's look at the optics of this. Like President Kelly said in episode 7, the people who went in for this treatment didn't know that they would be turned into Prime Sentinels. So you have a bunch of U.S. citizens who went in for an operation and were violated and didn't consent to this. The government knew that this was going to happen, but I don't think that they knew it was going to happen all at once, and they definitely didn't know about Genosha. So I think everything that's happening with Bastion, he has the government on his side. So Magneto bucking back against that is an act of war because this was the protocols that they put in place.
Well, isn't that part of the problem, is that they're setting up Magneto's act to be retaliation for Genosha against humanity. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't assume that some villain mastermind mutant sentinel is behind it. They think a human's behind it, or at least that's popular opinion. And so there's this general fear, again, and we're going back to that conversation with Trish and Beast again, that there's going to be violence from mutants in reaction to what happened there. And Magneto's act is an act of violence. I mean, I don't think we should be surprised when they're like, you killed thousands of people. I'm not talking about Prime Sentinels. I'm talking about people on planes. I'm talking about people in hospitals. I'm talking about people that if they were in a situation where electronics failed, they're dead.
Right.
And so I think that there's going to be a lot more catastrophic loss of human life because of that act, that no matter how it is on the scale between what happened in Genosha and not, it's going to be read as retaliation from mutants, and it's only going to whip humans up against that cause, no matter what everyone else is trying to do.
Yeah.
Damn, I didn't think of it that way.
Let's take it to the finish. Yeah, no, I think there's going to be a lot more like real world ramifications beyond the Prime Sentinels that I'm very excited for them to dig into the next
and
episode.
And Magneto was just the face of the X-Men too, so yeah, go ahead.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. Magneto was just the face of the X-Men, so he's the best representation. And I bet people think that he's in cahoots with all of this because, you know, Charles left Magneto with the X-Men.
Yeah.
So I feel like Charlie Day and It's Always Sunny just pointing to all of the different connecting lines on the board. But to finish off this episode, Wolverine, Morph sharing a beer, Prime Sentinels, and the corpses of former husks of humans littering the yard of the X Mansion. And they're just like, damn, shit's fucked up. Magneto declared war on humanity. They could really use the Professor right about now. Cue the Professor crashing in through the roof of the mansion. A good theory that I heard is that the electromagnetic pulse maybe took out the controls of the ship, which is why it came crashing through without much control.
That makes sense.
Instead of it just seemed like the Professor's a reckless tool that doesn't know how to drive. Which, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're pedals and he couldn't, use them. That's really, tolerant of me. Professor comes out of his pod, takes off the helmets. It's like the Shi'ar helmet that Lilandra was wearing when she first came down from the X-Men animated series. And he's like, I hope I'm not too late. He was. And he does his hand to forehead thing and calls to me, my X-Men. And you get some X-Men's faces popping up, including Storm in her new fit, which is like, okay, we're getting Storm back in the next episode.
I screamed like I was at the Renaissance concert when I saw Storm pop up. I was like, yes!
If we don't get that intro card for Storm next episode, there's going to be riots in the streets. I'm going to
go to the North Pole and set off an EMP if we don't get Storm and her new fit, just being like,
government, if you're listening, he's not going to do that. Don't think he's not. I promise.
Magneto was right. Charlie Peppers was right.
I saw someone, I can't remember if this was on my podcast episode or on Twitter because my brain is just all X-Men all the time now, but I saw someone say like, why was it those four? And it's like, well, he called his favorite 4 X-Men, that's why. Because like Beast is there.
He has favorites.
Like it's not like he's only calling people that aren't there, because Beast is literally there where he is, but he calls Beast, Storm, Jean, and Cyclops. And I liked the idea of him being like, the rest, whatever, but let me call my 4 favorites.
Tough look for Logan.
I mean, Wolverine and Morph were right there in front of him, though. So I guess that's why. But all
Beast was there too.
Oh shit! Morph and Wolverine weren't on the group chat. Yeah.
We're not. Yeah.
It's tough looks, dude. Yeah, Jubilee not on the group chat. I guess she's captured or whatever, so she can't go anyway. But That's super funny. Do you guys have any final thoughts on the episode, or just honestly, Ian, like the season as a whole, before we head into our Sentinel ratings for this episode?
It's been hit after hit after hit. There has not been a skip this season. The Motendo was maybe my least favorite. It was more of a little bit of a filler, but like I still enjoyed that episode. There's nothing I haven't been fully on board for. And I gotta mention, the horror gal in me loves that the Prime Sentinels are basically like Deadites from Evil Dead. Like I love that.
I am glad that the Prime Sentinels are maybe off the board right now, because the X-Men be getting their asses whooped since episode 5. I've never seen them get beat up this much. This is terrible. I haven't seen the X-Men get beat up this much since I had a Super Nintendo in the 90s, and I kept failing the levels in X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. Just egregious. They were getting their asses kicked so much.
We are at the point where they need to start taking some dubs rather than L's. They have taken a lot of L's this season, and maybe there will be some more L's, but like Rogue's got to wake up. We got to get Storm back. I think we got some dubs on the way, hopefully. But they tend to be bittersweet dubs if we know the X-Men animated series well enough. So that's going to bring us into our final Sentinel ratings for this episode. Ian, we rated it on cocktails last time, not Sentinels or Batarangs, but we're using Sentinels this time. So feel free to use a half Sentinel, but what would you rate this episode of Tolerance is Extinction Part 1?
What do you, out of how many do you normally do? 5?
Oh, out of 5. I didn't say that. That's hilarious. Just like that, out of 5, yeah.
So I think I would go 4.5, just because I'm saving the 5, but 4.5 out of 5 Sentinels, I think.
I am also, you read my mind, 4.5 Sentinels. I don't think that this didn't have the craftsmanship of episode 7 and how that episode dealt with grief and rage. This episode felt a little bit more like table setting with some great action set pieces attached to it. But I will say what kept it from being 4 Sentinels and pushed it up to 4.5 is Val Cooper's speech, all of those amazing cameos, Magneto looking like he's about to start an OnlyFans, just all of the things. I thought it was really great. Yeah. But not perfect.
I would sub to Daddy Magnus.
Yeah, Daddy Magnus.
I would sub to Daddy Magnus in a second. It's funny, Ian, we have a running joke that Charlie and I don't talk about these ratings beforehand, but there's some groupthink happening because we continue to rate the episodes the exact same every single time. And this episode is no different. I am also at a 4.5 Sentinels.
Look at us.
And that was like what I was going to rate it the whole time. I totally agree. I mean, if this is table setting, this is fine fucking China for sure.
Yeah.
And the action pieces were amazing. I do agree that Bright Eyes was a bit deeper on sort of like an emotional depth front, but I am like so looking forward to what we're going to be getting with these next couple of episodes of X-Men 97. So that's going to do it for our coverage of Tolerance is Extinction Part 1. If this is any indication, we're going to be diving deep into Parts 2 and 3 over the next couple of weeks. And before we head out, I just wanted to sincerely thank Ian Carlos Crawford for coming out and joining us one more time, and hopefully not for the last time. We'd like to keep you around as much as we can. So Ian, before you go, just tell the people where they can go and find you on all of the things.
You can find my podcast, which we're also doing weekly coverage of X-Men 97, SlayerFest 98, at SlayerFest X98, on all social media platforms. We do video recordings that go on YouTube, and the audio goes in our podcast feed. And you can find me at Ian X Carlos on all social media platforms, and my horror podcast, which is currently on hiatus, but is coming back to do Pretty Little Liars Season 2 reaction videos this week, is at My Bloody Judy on everything.
Amazing. Very cool. Charlie, anything to say before we head out?
Oh, I love you boys. This is what a great way to start the day. This is amazing.
That's going to do it for this episode of Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff. For myself, Steve Selnick, our guest Ian Carlos Crawford, and my good friend Charlie Peppers, we will see you all on the next one. Bye. Friends.